Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, the Friday Night Lights are set in Hampton. Officials and school board members took a tour of the newly renovated Darling Stadium. How has our highway system impacted communities of color? VCIJ editor Lou Hansen has a talk with reporter Elizabeth McGowan about the politics behind our interstate highways.
This is piled on with the historical discrimination that happened with mortgages, insurance, and just access to other financial services.
And Virginia released its annual crime numbers this week. Barry Graham digs into the numbers. But first, this news update from NPR. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. According to documents obtained by WHRO, Chesapeake Mayor Rick West asked the city attorney to investigate a personal legal matter for his stepbrother. It may not have been illegal, but WHRO's Ryan Murphy spoke with experts who say the ethical dashboard should have been flashing yellow.
Jonathan West emailed his stepbrother, Chesapeake's Rick West, in August 2022. He was running into a permit problem while trying to build on a property in Georgia. In emails obtained by WHRO, Jonathan West asked his stepbrother, then the mayor of Chesapeake, to have one of the city's attorneys look at the issue for him. Rick West says he doesn't believe he crossed an ethical line, but acknowledges now he probably shouldn't have done it.
For me, asking his opinion about something is not inappropriate. However, as it turns out, what he did in response to that makes it inappropriate.
Then City Attorney Jay Stroman researched and made calls to officials in Georgia, according to the emails. Suddenly, Jonathan West's permit problem was taken care of. Ethics experts say the mayor's request creates a problematic perception, even if it doesn't violate written rules. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
To read the full details and read the documents for yourself, visit WHRO.org. Norfolk was the first of area school districts to begin classes this week. We get more from WHRO's Barry Graham.
The new school year in the district is starting earlier than ever and brings several changes. Teachers will receive an 8% pay raise, aligning salaries with nearby districts. Norfolk Public Schools added over 400 new full-time teachers. For the 2024-25 school year, all Norfolk students will receive free breakfast and lunch thanks to the USDA's community eligibility provision with no application required. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Christopher Newport University announced last week that a task force probing the university's expansion into a historically black neighborhood has begun collecting documents and hearing testimony. Lou Hansen with the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO has more.
The university says the local task force has met 7 times and has gathered material and input from historians and land-use experts. CNU and the City of Newport News created the panel in response to a series by the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO. The VCIJ investigation found the university and city leaders systematically diminished a thriving black community in pursuit of campus growth. Just 5 houses remain in one Newport News neighborhood that was once home to dozens of black families. The state has established a separate commission to explore the impact Virginia's public university expansions have had on other communities of color statewide, including in Norfolk and Charlottesville. Lou Hansen, WHRO News.
Game on! Hampton's City Council and school board members got a first look at the newly renovated Darling Stadium on Wednesday. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
A new track and synthetic turf surface are the centerpiece upgrades for the city's high school stadium.
I'm excited for our student athletes. They're going to be able to compete at a higher level. This is state-of-the-art, and this is modern technology.
That's Hampton City Council member Steve Brown, credited for advocating for the project starting in 2018. Unlike many turf fields, Darling Stadium employs a loblolly pine infill instead of crumb rubber pellets, which the manufacturer says keeps the surface to a temperature consistent with natural grass. City crews still need to pave the stadium parking lots, but that work is expected to complete before the start of the fall athletic season. All of Hampton's high schools use Darling Stadium for games, and it has been used for regional and state competitions. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
A decade ago, officials around the Chesapeake Bay agreed to ramp up efforts to restore the ecosystem The deadline is 2020. Tick-tock. How's it coming? WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports.
The Chesapeake Bay Foundation led a discussion in Virginia Beach this week on the future of the Bay Agreement. Jay Ford says it's changed a lot for the better since 2014.
It is in many ways one of a kind and something that has been unique and inspirational to others that are trying to tackle regional challenges for environmental impacts.
But there's a long way to go. And over the last decade, we've learned a lot more about the far-reaching impacts of climate change. Ford says those impacts, like warming waters, are making it harder to restore the bay.
These two things are very closely related. And so better integrating climate response into the Bay Agreement has got to be a top priority.
Leaders of the Chesapeake Bay Partnership will meet in December and decide how to move forward. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The Nansemond Indian Nation held its annual powwow in Suffolk this past weekend on land it now officially owns. WHRO's Sienna Morales reports it's the first time the tribe has been able to do that.
The Nansemonds are the indigenous people of the Nansemond River. They lived there before English settlers arrived and have been hosting an annual powwow since 1988 on land beside the river in Suffolk. City leaders transferred ownership of the lands to the nation in May. This year is the first powwow since the tribe became official owners again.
It's just a wonderful time of celebration, and the turnout was absolutely huge. And I'd like to think it was people that were coming to help us celebrate for the first time of being the sole owners of this property and tribal land.
That's Assistant Chief David Henneman. The celebration brought together dancers, vendors, and people from different indigenous nations. Henneman says it was also a chance to share Native culture with the public. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
Hampton is establishing a sister city relationship with the Angola province from where the first Africans brought to English-speaking North America were taken. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
Hampton is working to strengthen ties with Melange, Angola, after a delegation including a few city council members visited the nation in June. Vice Mayor Jimmy Gray and council member Hope Harper met with the provincial governor and the president of Angola on the trip. Gray says they were very interested in solidifying the relationship.
But also the exchange of ideas and culture and economics and those kinds of things are important to them as well.
The ties to Angola run deep in Hampton. The first African people brought to Virginia were taken from the Melange province against their will, landing at what's now Fort Monroe. Gray says Angola's president will visit in a few weeks for a ceremonial signing of the agreement. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, VCIJ editor Lou Hansen is back. He'll speak with reporter Elizabeth McGowan about her investigation into how interstate highways have negatively impacted the health of communities of color. But first, a house in Rodanthe on the Outer Banks, no, not that one, collapsed into the ocean over the weekend. WHRO's Catherine Hafner has the details.
The Rodanthe shoreline was a sight to see on Friday afternoon. An entire house collapsed off its stilts, floating away into the Atlantic and leaving behind a stairway to nowhere.
Oh my God!
That sound comes from a video captured by a bystander and shared by the local fire department. Officials say the structure was battered by rough surf from Hurricane Ernesto passing way off the coast. Debris has spread about 11 miles north. The Outer Banks is made up of barrier islands that have always been vulnerable to erosion, but sea level rise driven by climate change is making it worse. This weekend's collapse was the 7th in the area in the past few years. Local officials say many more homes are at risk. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art features 61 local artists in their long-running Made in VA series. Kate Nowak reports for WHRO.
For more than 30 years, the Virginia MoCA's Made in VA biennial exhibit has showcased local talent. Recently, the series has exploded. The museum received a record number of 699 submissions, has 61 featured artists in the exhibit, and was able to offer a $10,000 first-place prize. First-place artist Vivian Chu of Henrico County will also have a solo exhibition run concurrently with the next Made in VA biennial. Made in VA runs until January. If you're lucky, you may see some of the artists who are often more than happy to stop and chat about their work. Kate Nowak, WHRO News.
Lou Hansen, senior editor with the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism, is back. He sat down with reporter Elizabeth McGowan to discuss the impact of interstate highways on communities of color in Richmond.
Hi, I'm Lou Hansen, senior editor of the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO. Welcome, Elizabeth. Tell us about your reporting. What types of health risks come with living near a highway?
Thanks for having me here to talk about this relatively new research that the World Health Organization and other bodies started to research in the early 2000s, that the health harms are real, but they're related to what happened to these communities are they close to health care? Are they able to be close to transportation that they can use? And what kind of food do they have access to? And this is piled on with the historical discrimination that happened with mortgages, insurance, and just access to other financial services. So this highway and the tailpipe emissions and everything else is just all of those harms are compounded by that backstory.
You interviewed CNU geographer Johnny Finn. What was part of the main takeaways of his findings in Hampton roads?
One of the starkest realities he uncovered was this 20-year age disparity difference between people who lived on the downtown side of St. Paul's Boulevard and also near I-264. People in that historically black community near Tidewater Gardens were living up to about age 61 compared to 80 some odd years in the downtown.
Now, to be clear, these harms that were caused by living near a highway contributed to the health and life expectancy disparities.
That's exactly right.
What struck me was the traffic figures of people living by I-95 in Jackson Ward and downtown near I-264. There's more than 100,000 vehicles a day that are passing through. Tell me, what are some of the health effects of living near that kind of traffic?
Doctors have started to really pay attention to this. It's the noise. It's what comes out of a tailpipe. All of that pollution contributes to asthma, diabetes, heart issues. There's something called the urban heat island effect because there's so much asphalt and concrete. The heat of the sun is just absorbed. There's one doctor in Northern Virginia told me that when there's a heat weather event, she knows that there's going to be a spike in people with asthma visiting the hospital.
Richmond and Norfolk are actually, they're in the early stages of redeveloping neighborhoods near I-264 and I-95. And you interviewed a lot of experts about what could be done in these redevelopments to mitigate some of the potential hazards. What do these experts tell you?
Let's look at Richmond first. The idea is to put a park-like bridge over I-95 for a whole section of Jackson Ward. And if done properly and the acoustics are studied, that could mitigate noise. If we move to electric cars, it could maybe eliminate part of the emissions problem. In Norfolk, the I-264 is a bit more challenging because they're not going to shut it down, but if you make the ramps quieter by maybe using a different surface and eliminating things like the brakes that trucks use.
Part of making things quieter and more pleasant and bringing some greenery into a community is having community gardens. And you found a young gardener in Jackson Ward in Richmond. Tell us about her.
That was literally a breath of fresh air. There was a lot right near Gilpin Court, which is a public housing complex. This young woman, Danielle, there was a scrappy space that one of the Gilpin Court neighbors had said, why don't we have a garden here? She works with middle school students. In addition to teaching them life skills, these kids are learning about plant biology, just how to harvest, what to harvest. And to her, it's a way of saying, let's, as a community, reclaim some of the land near this highway and make something of it that's healthy for all of us.
Well, thank you so much for all your reporting, Elizabeth. So really appreciate your in-depth reporting. To read more of this, go to vcij.org or WHRO.org. And also like to mention that this reporting was supported by the Annenberg Foundation.
All right, you're welcome, and thank you.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
There is a type of bamboo that is native to the United States. It is called river cane, and it has an importance both for indigenous people and the natural environment. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd reports on efforts to restore the plant.
On a Saturday afternoon, a group of 10 volunteers gather for a short hike in southwest Virginia. They tromp through mud and long grass. They're revisiting a patch of river cane they planted 3 years ago. Laura Young with the Virginia Department of Conservation says when they're babies, these plants look like mere sticks that fit in the palm of your hand.
They're just those little scraggly things like that. Now they're literally taller than us.
As she stands next to the plants that now tower over her head, she says they can stand up against invasive species and reduce damage from flooding.
River cane is really amazing for stabilizing stream banks. It's great for habitat for migratory songbirds.
This bamboo that grows up to 30 feet used to be abundant along rivers in much of the southeast. Since the 1800s, river cane slowly faded from riverbanks as farmers cleared it to make space for agriculture. It's now recognized as a culturally significant plant for many indigenous tribes, including the Choctaw and Cherokee, who use it for intricate artistic basket weaving. They've also been working to bring it back in Oklahoma, Louisiana, and North Carolina. Young says their work has inspired her to grow river cane here in Virginia. And these volunteers are committed to the project. People like Abigail Burgraff, who holds her 3-year-old daughter Susanna's hand. Their rain boots are covered in mud. She says her daughter learned to walk when they came out to weed this patch of river cane 2 years ago.
She'd done the, taking a couple steps and then just started walking around. I was like, okay then, I guess we're doing that now.
She and others helped start the baby river cane plants on their porches. They nursed them in plastic sandwich bags till they were ready to transplant. Young says it doesn't take a lot of technical expertise to grow a patch along a riverbank.
This is something that a 6th grade class could do.
What began as 5 volunteers has now grown to 20. This year, this group planted 1,000 river cane along the Clinch and Powell rivers. Young hopes next year they'll add more riverbanks where America's only native bamboo can grow again. For NPR News, I'm Roxy Todd in Lee County, Virginia.
North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper says he thinks Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris could flip the state come November. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson has more.
Governor Cooper spoke with Politico the first night of the Democratic National Convention. In the 30-minute interview, Cooper recounted North Carolina's recent political history. He said Harris makes him and other Democrats in the state hopeful after decades of statewide Republican success.
North Carolina is one of those purple states that is always right there. I have a 2008 feeling about North Carolina, and we know what that means.
North Carolina last voted for a Democratic presidential candidate in 2008 when 49% of voters in the state chose Barack Obama. Since then, the populations in North Carolina's urban Democratic strongholds have exploded. The Raleigh area, for example, has nearly doubled in population since 2008. Cooper was rumored to be on Harris's shortlist for vice presidential running mates before she chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
Virginia State Police released their annual crime analysis report this week. Barry Graham has the details.
Most crime rates in Virginia increased in 2023. Violent crimes rose by 1.3%. However, the number of reported homicides decreased. Motor vehicle thefts increased, as did drug arrests. Hate crime saw a significant uptick over the past year, with most offenses involving a bias against religion. The report also noted a slight increase in fraud offenses, such as identity theft. One bright spot was a decrease in burglaries, which continues a downward trend seen over the past decade. The state police collects crime data from local police and sheriff's offices and issues the report each year. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Many of the local soldiers who were part of the effort to deliver aid to Gaza have returned home. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has the details.
Roughly 235 members of the 7th Transportation Brigade from Fort Eustis have already returned home, as have sailors from the West Coast who were part of the operation. According to Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh, the last 6 million pounds of aid is still waiting to be delivered into Gaza. In July, bad weather ended the U.S. effort to build and run a mobile pier to bring humanitarian assistance into the region. The troops left Virginia in March. 4 Army boats remain in the Mediterranean. The local merchant marine ship MV Bonavides was reported heading into the Atlantic Monday morning. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Leaders and top donors broke ground Monday morning on the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art's new facility at Virginia Wesleyan University. WHRO's Ryan Murphy was there.
MoCA Interim Director Allison Burns says the new building will allow it to show off even more art and will be more accessible to the wider Hampton Roads community than its current location at the oceanfront.
Our new museum will serve as one of the region's largest art classrooms and creative hubs for K-12, university students, and lifelong learners.
On hand for the ceremonial tossing of the dirt were 3 of the biggest names in regional philanthropy, Susan and David Good, Joan Brock, and Jane Batten. The 4 are together funding the construction with a combined $25 million gift. The facility should be done in time for MoCA to start exhibitions in early 2026. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
And we should mention Virginia Wesleyan President Scott Miller as a member of WHRO's governing board of directors. WHRO's Vice President of Production, Jeff Fine, is also a member of MoCA's Board of Trustees. Neither was involved in editorial decisions pertaining to this report. Virginia Beach's hottest new musical group may be BDO, a trio of inmates at the city jail. WHRO's Sienna Morales has the story from their first performance this week.
Get your surfboard, something to work towards. I was raised different. Yeah.
That's Jonathan Jones, Mark Austin, and Zykia Barnes. They're part of a rehabilitation program conceived by Sheriff Rocky Holcomb, intended to help inmates re-enter society. The group performed 2 originals and 2 covers at the Virginia Beach Correctional Center. It was broadcast on the top 40 radio station Z104.
And that's what we're here today for, just to be able to give the public a chance to see that, yeah, we made some bad decisions and we made some bad choices, but we're not going to be defined by the decisions we made that were mistakes.
That's Jones introducing one of their songs. Other Sheriff's Office rehabilitation initiatives include alternative sentencing programs and supportive housing. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Steve Walsh, Nick McNamara, Sienna Morales, and Kate Nowak. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd, and Lou Hansen and Elizabeth McGowan for VCIJ. Thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's broadcast. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get news updates anytime at WHRO.org, on the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.